Hi, and welcome to today's Engaging for Missouri webinar. I'm Alice Roach from the University of Missouri, and I'll be your host today. With each of these 30-minute webinars, we intend to share research-based insights that leaders like you can apply in your own work to benefit and strengthen the state's agriculture and food system, hospitality sector, economy, communities, and families. Today, Dr. Rui Yao will speak about how personal characteristics affect financial decision-making. Before I invite her to begin, I want to share a few housekeeping items. First, we'll close today with a question and answer session. Those of you who connected today via your computers may submit your questions in the chat screen. If you joined today by phone, then you may email me your questions at roacham@missouri.edu. Second, all attendees are muted and may not start their video. Third, if you encounter any technical problems, then you can let me know by submitting a comment in the chat screen, or you can send me an email at roacham@missouri.edu. And last, we will make a recording of today's presentation available. You can look for an email from Zoom that shares more about where you can access that recording in about a day from now. You can also find an archive of all of our previous Engaging for Missouri webinars on our Division of Applied Social Sciences YouTube channel. So with that, we'll transition to the topic of today's presentation, which is titled Personal Traits That Make More Sense. Again, presenting today is Dr. Rui Yao, who's a personal financial planning professor in our division. So thank you, Dr. Yao, for presenting today. If you could please unmute your microphone and start your video, then we can begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Alice. Good morning, everyone. See if the slide advances. Okay. Financial decision making is critical to wealth accumulation. It determines how much money is saved and how much return can be achieved, which is determined by what investment products are utilized and how much to allocate to each product. These are decisions that directly lead to differences in wealth accumulation. In a household context, who makes financial decisions for the household can be as critical as the financial decisions to make. The purpose of this paper is to answer three questions. Is financial decision-making an efficiency problem? Do relative advantages in personal attributes enhance decision-making responsibility assumption? And how big is the opportunity cost for assigning a wrong decision maker? Various theoretical models have been introduced to conceptualize the household financial decision-making process. Very briefly, the bargaining model assumes that each household member has a utility function and they negotiate with each other to reach parallel efficiency. Factors such as employment status, earnings, and education affect financial responsibility allocation through bargaining power. In the collective model, the household utility function is a weighted sum of the household members' utility functions, where the weights are called the parental weights, and personal attributes such as personality and cognitive abilities affect household financial responsibility allocation. I'm going to skip the development of the theories on labor division, but these theories imply that an efficiency-seeking household will assign whoever has comparative advantages in financial decision-making to assume that responsibility. The psychology and economic literature show that certain personality traits and cognitive abilities are related to better financial outcomes, which implies that if wealth accumulation is the goal, the person who possesses higher levels of these personal attributes has comparative advantages in making financial decisions. If we consider a production function where personal attributes are factors for production of sound financial decisions, certain personality traits and cognitive abilities have higher productivities in making these decisions as opposed to alternative housework. So we begin our empirical analysis by testing the first hypothesis to identify personal attributes that favor household financial responsibility assumption. So the first hypothesis is a couple's respective personality traits and cognitive abilities predict their probability of being the financial decision maker of the household. The Rui model of self-selection into an occupation and its extensions imply that whoever has the comparative advantages in managing household finances should take the financial decision-making responsibility. From testing the first hypothesis, we can identify personal attributes that have higher marginal productivity in financial decision-making as opposed to alternative household tasks. As a result, who has higher endowments in these personal attributes would have the comparative advantage in household financial decision-making. To achieve the maximum efficiency, this person should be the primary financial decision maker of the household. And then we empirically test the second hypothesis, which is the relative advantages in personality attributes that favor financial decision-making are associated with a higher probability of taking financial responsibility. In light of the collective rationality, who makes financial decisions in a household is an efficiency problem. So if a household achieves its parental optimal financial responsibility allocation based on a couple's respective or relative advantages in personality and cognitive abilities, they would have achieved the highest possible wealth level. If the allocation violates the empirical rules, the allocation is inefficient and would harm their wealth. We thus developed a measure of allocation inefficiency based on the empirical model of financial responsibility allocation and tested the third hypothesis, which is the inefficient allocation of financial responsibility is associated with lower household wealth. Our sample was drawn from 10 waves of the health and retirement study, starting from 1992, excluding wave 3 due to missing wealth variables. The HRS is the largest survey in the United States on retirees and those approaching their retirement age. Each observation was a married couple observed in an HRS wave. In the raw sample of HRS, only 46 households were same-sex couples, equivalent to less than 0.2% of our sample. So we dropped them from our analysis because the sample size was too small for a specific analysis to distinguish the difference between same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples. If a couple divorced and either partner formed a new household with a new partner, we defined the new couple as a new household. We had a total of 26,057 observations for the baseline analysis. For a robustness check, we only used the subsample of household observations in the wave where they first appeared in the HRS survey. And this resulted in 3,579 observations. As a second robustness check, we controlled for potential confounders, including risk preference, financial planning horizon, and life expectation. The sample size was reduced to 2,335 since only several waves included these variables. The major
Dr. Yao, when you're advancing your slides, could you please use the arrows at the lower left-hand corner? We're seeing more of your screen whenever you're advancing by clicking. So let's try to use those arrows down the lower left-hand corner if that's possible.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
The major financial decision maker in a household was the member of the couple who was most knowledgeable about household finances and answered the household level survey questions about housing, income, and assets. We used 3 variables to quantify household wealth accumulation, total net worth, financial net worth, and the share of risky assets in financial net worth. That works? Okay, for psychological characteristics, we used the big 5 personality traits: conscientiousness, emotional stability, agreeableness, extroversion, and openness. We also used 2 measures of cognitive abilities, numeracy and memory. Sorry. In our sample, 65 of the households had a male financial decision maker. Both financial decision makers and spouses had roughly the same memory ability on average. Financial decision makers had a higher numeracy ability than their spouse. Compared with their spouse, financial decision maker also had a higher average value of conscientiousness, emotional stability, openness, but a lower value of extroversion and agreeableness. The husband's conscientiousness, memory, and numeracy increased his probability of assuming the financial decision making role. His openness decreased his probability. The wife's conscientiousness, mental stability, and numeracy decreased her husband's, so increased her own probability. These patterns imply that anyone with higher conscientiousness and numeracy was more likely to be the major financial decision maker at home. This is consistent with the first hypothesis. Numeracy had a greater effect for husbands than for wives, which means the wife needs to exceed her husband in numeracy by a greater degree in order to be the major financial decision maker for the household. Then her husband's numeracy abilities have to exceed hers for him to have that same role. A higher husband's advantage over the wife in conscientiousness, memory, and numeracy predicted a higher probability of the husband assuming financial responsibility. A wife's greater advantage in these attributes enhanced her probability of assuming financial responsibility. These are consistent with the second hypothesis. We performed 2 robustness checks. First, although the allocation of financial responsibility rarely switched hands in our sample, we would like to test whether the patterns discovered so far held for the initial allocation of financial responsibility. We ran the same analysis using the subsample of household observations in the wave where they first appeared in the HRS survey. The financial responsibility allocation rules based on strength and relative advantages in conscientiousness, memory, and numeracy in subsequent waves will still apply to the initial allocation of financial responsibility. For a second robustness check, we included additional control variables such as the husband and wife's risk aversion, financial planning horizon, and life expectation. These are potential confounders that could be correlated with household financial decision making. Conscientiousness, memory, and numeracy remained the strongest predictor of financial responsibility allocation. To analyze the consequences of a misallocation of financial responsibilities, we constructed 3 inefficiency indicators and tested whether inefficiency in financial responsibility assignment would result in less favorable financial outcomes. The first indicator was based on the husband's and wife's strength in personality traits and cognitive abilities. Findings show that most couples efficiently allocated financial responsibility, and 30.8% of the households misallocated their financial responsibility. We found a 100% financial responsibility inefficiency resulted in a 88.3% reduction of total net worth and a 85.9% reduction of financial net worth. This means that, for example, the husband had financial decisions, made financial decisions when the couple's respective personality and cognitive abilities predicted that the wife should be the decision maker with a probability of 1. So this is an extreme situation where he should not have been assigned the responsibility by any measure of his personalities and cognitive abilities. The second indicator was based on whether the husband had relative advantages in personal attributes. Measured by this indicator, about 32.2% of the sample misallocated their financial responsibility. Findings show that a 100% financial responsibility inefficiency resulted in an 86.4% reduction of total net worth and a 79.1% reduction of financial net worth. Again, this is an extreme situation where he is relatively disadvantaged in all of the personalities and cognitive abilities that favor financial decision-making, and yet he is in the financial decision-making role. The third indicator was based on the degree of relative advantages. 31% of the sample misallocated their financial responsibility, measured by this indicator. We found that at 100% financial responsibility inefficiency resulted in an 85.9% reduction of total net worth and a 76.3% reduction of financial net worth. In summary, these results show a consistent wealth penalty of inefficient financial responsibility allocation, and this is consistent with our third hypothesis. So now that we know the results, a good question to ask is, so what? Our results show that the inefficiency of initial allocation of financial responsibility could lead to different trajectories of household wealth accumulation. So when new couples assign their financial decision-making responsibility, it is important to recognize the role of comparative advantages in household financial responsibility allocation. Our findings suggest that assigning financial decision-making responsibility based on relative advantages in personal attributes could be an alternative to financial education interventions that aim at improving financial well-being, given that financial education interventions have been documented in some literature to have limited and short-lived effects. Our findings have important implications for the financial planning profession. Based on the prediction of the couple's respective personality traits, cognitive abilities, or the relative advantages in these personal attributes, inefficient allocation of financial responsibility still exists in about 30% of households in our sample. Several reasons could explain why households end up with inefficient allocation. For example, experiments have shown that irrational financial respondents are unwilling to give up their control of income in return for investment efficiency. The awareness of inefficient status quo financial responsibility allocation and its contributing factors enables the financial planning professionals to better service their clients. Financial planners and extension agents have an active role in providing advising and counseling services to counter the effects of factors that interfere with the efficient allocation of financial responsibility. Our results suggest that it is critical for the financial planning professionals and extension agents to engage both spouses in the initial discussion of household finances and to assess the efficiency of the status quo financial decision-making process. Couple-based financial coaching may help facilitate some conversations between couples. We should not let a status quo or gender stereotype get in our way when we make decisions about who to make decisions. I'm not saying females are better or worse than males in making decisions. I'm not a feminist, I'm an objectivist, if that's a word. If optimizing the result is the goal, whoever is better at making financial or maybe any decisions should be put in that role and vice versa. Of course, if the final result is not a concern, then do what makes you feel the best. And importantly, take ownership of the result of that decision. The opportunity cost is a very difficult concept for many people. In terms of playing with money, or maybe in any decisions, most people don't assess what would have happened if we were to go back and do it all over again in the exact same environment with a different decision maker. Nobody does that. We rationalize our results because the other alternative never happened. If your last name is Musk, Gates, or Buffett, maybe you don't have to worry about finances. But unfortunately and practically, most people don't have this privilege when saving for their financial future. Therefore, recognizing the more efficient financial decision maker is an important first step for financial security and independence. Thank you so much for listening to my ramblings this morning. May I entertain some of your questions?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Yao, for presenting. And we do have some time for questions. So if you have a question, it looks like the chat had been closed for a bit, but it's back open. So please go ahead and enter your questions into the chat screen, or you can send them to me via email at roacham@missouri.edu. Dr. Yao, our first question reads, has the survey been analyzed relative to ethnic or social status background of the respondents?
Yes, we included ethnic and social background as a control because that was, we could interpret results in terms of, the age effect, the race association with decision making, and also the income and net worth. We could, but that was not the focus of this paper, so I did not include that in the results.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit more about who conducts this study?
Yes. The Health and Retirement Study is a longitudinal project conducted by the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan. This project is sponsored by the National Institute on Aging and the Social Security Administration.
Great, thank you. Another question from an attendee is, do you have information on factors that determine whether the role is misallocated? Is it older couples, for example, that this tends to happen to?
I think it would be interesting to delve more into that, but we did not.
Sure. A future study, perhaps, right?
Right.
Excellent. How are personality and cognitive abilities measured in the study?
We use the big 5 personality traits, including conscientiousness, emotional stability, agreeableness, extroversion, and openness. And these were measured through the big 5 inventory in the HRS Leave Behind survey. And the inventory is a self-report scale. It consists of 44 items, which are related on a 5-point Likert scale from 1, disagree a lot, to 5, agree a lot. Conscientiousness was measured by the assessment of being reckless, organized, responsible, hardworking, self-disciplined, sympathetic, impulsive, cautious, thorough, and thrifty. And you may notice the reckless and impulsive are the opposite of being, organized and cautious. So whenever this happens, we reverse code it. That may not be very important to you all. But emotional stability was measured by being moody, worrying, nervous, and calm. Extroversion was measured by the assessment of being outgoing, friendly, lively, active, and talkative. Agreeableness was measured by the assessment of being helpful, warm, caring, soft-hearted, and sympathetic. Openness was measured by being creative, imaginative, intelligent, curious, broad-minded, sophisticated, and adventurous.
Excellent, thank you. If consumers are interested in assessing how well they stack up on the personality traits that matter, and also the cognitive skills that affect financial decision-making, how would you recommend, or what kind of resources would you recommend that they use so they can better understand their skills and use that assessment to make decisions about how to assign financial decision-making authority?
In terms of making the decisions about who to make financial decisions at home, all couples need to know is whether they have an advantage over their spouse or partner. So they could, assess each other by the items that I just read. Now, if they are curious about their relative position compared with others, there are some websites that provide such tests to site visitors and provide a comparison between the test taker and others who have taken the tests. If I remember correctly, healthline.com recommended a site. Here is my disclosure, though. I do not work for healthline.com. I don't get paid from them. And, I'm not in any other way related to them. So, and I do not know how meaningful your results would be, as I know nothing about the visitors to those sites.
Great, thank you. A large share of American households today have single adults who weren't included in your study. So for single adults who don't have the personality traits or the cognitive abilities that are linked to good financial decision-making, how might they acquire the skills that they need to manage their finances? And is this where a financial planner might be able to be involved in the process?
Well, at least the singles don't have the problem of deciding who to make decisions. They are it. That said, because conscientiousness and emotional stability are positively correlated with accumulated net worth and financial net worth, they might seek to improve on those. But I am far from being an expert who have the ability to comment on personality interventions, other than the fact that they do exist. I will say that singles who are weaker in these two attributes should seek to partner with someone who are stronger, or seek advice from financial professionals, like you said. On the other hand, numeracy is also positively correlated with financial results, and numeracy can be improved.
Excellent. So if someone's interested in working with a financial planner, what are the considerations to take into account whenever you're identifying a financial planner who would be a good asset on your team?
So practically, I'm not sure how likely clients can use these scales we discussed to interview their financial advisors. They may not, this may not be very popular, and even if administered, clients may not get a truthful answer. And to be fair, this study didn't evaluate the decision-making results of financial advisors, which may be different from the result of financial layperson's decision-making. So I'll just comment on some generic items that consumers should normally seek from a financial advisor. For example, their credentials, their experience, their level of care, and their complaint history, as well as their fees. And I will go into more details with each one. The credentials, the gold standard in the financial planning industry for financial planners are the CFP, the Certified Financial Planner. And experience, I would say, if they have survived at least 2 market cycles. So if they were in business prior to the 07-09 recession and are still in business now, it means they're not that bad. This is the signaling theory. Mutual funds all have track records, but financial advisors don't, and practically can't, since clients are different and their history may not be relevant to you. But luckily, we have other things to look for. For example, level of care that's committed to clients. Fiduciary duty means to put clients' interest above advisors themselves, and this is the highest standard. If advisors are not adhering to this level of care, you need to ask why and get an answer that is very specific and acceptable to you. In terms of complaint history, nationally, you can go to the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission. You can go to the CFP board if the advisor has a CFP designation. And you can go to FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. At the state level, there are state-specific insurance and securities regulators. In Missouri, for example, we have both the Missouri Department of Insurance and Missouri Securities Division. And last is their fees. They should be completely willing and able to show you exactly the sources of their pay and the cost to you. And if an advisor is not transparent like that or tells you their service is free, then you know what you should do. Shop around like you shop around for a big ticket item, because financial decision making, as you see, if in the wrong hand, it could have a big penalty.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Yao, for presenting today and for taking our questions. It's time to go ahead and close today's webinar. Thanks to our audience for joining us. When you exit Zoom, you'll see a post-webinar survey will load in your browser. Please consider responding, as we'll use the results to improve the webinar experience and also brainstorm future presentation topics. Again, you should receive a recorded copy of today's webinar via your email within about a day from now. You can join us for our next Engaging for Missouri webinar in 2022 at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, January 12th. Ryan Milholland will present Preparing Your Farm for Financial Success in 2022, and he'll show how to use MU Extension's 2022 planning budgets. Again, thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great Wednesday. Thank you, Dr. Yao.
Thank you.